The rope burned through the dirt, dragging flesh and bone behind a $150,000 Mercedes. Blood marked the desert road. Inside the SUV, three young people laughed, counted donations, and aimed cameras at the dying dog struggling to breathe. No one stopped. No one cared. Just another piece of content for the algorithm. Then a beat-up Ford truck appeared in the rearview mirror. Behind the wheel sat a man in faded military uniform, his German shepherd already sensing what his eyes confirmed. Commander Marcus Webb didn't know he was driving toward a choice that would make him a hero to millions, and a target to people with the money and power to destroy him. He just knew he wasn't driving past. Before this story unfolds, hit that subscribe button and stay with us until the very end. Comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this message of courage and compassion travels. Now let's begin. The Arizona heat was a living thing. It pressed down on the desert highway like a hand holding you underwater, making every breath feel borrowed. Marcus Webb's truck had no air conditioning. The compressor had died 2 months ago, about the same time his savings account had finally hit zero. He drove with both windows down, hot wind turning his cab into a convection oven. His Navy working uniform Type 3 soaked through with sweat. The green and brown digital camouflage pattern was faded from too many washes, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. At 35, Marcus looked older than his years. Short, dark brown hair cut military precise, face weathered by sun and stress. Eyes that had seen things he'd spent 3 years trying not to remember. Beside him, Ranger sat perfectly still in the passenger seat. The German shepherd was 7 years old, his tan and black coat gleaming even in this punishing heat. Ranger had been Marcus's canine partner for 5 deployments, had detected IEDs that would have killed their entire squad, had taken a bullet meant for Marcus in Kandahar, survived, and never hesitated to walk point again. When Marcus was medically discharged, too much shrapnel in his left leg, too many nightmares that made him a liability, Ranger was retired too. They'd left the Navy together, brothers who'd kept each other alive when the world was trying very hard to kill them both. "We'll figure it out, boy," Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to Ranger. "Interview didn't go well, but something'll come through." Ranger's ear twitched. He didn't look convinced. Marcus's phone sat in the cup holder, showing $47 in his checking account. Rent was due in 3 days. He owed $800 he didn't have. His landlord had been patient. Retired Army, understood the struggle. But patience had limits. The job interview that morning had been his 6th in 2 weeks. Security consulting firm. Good pay. Benefits. The interviewer had been impressed right up until Marcus mentioned his PTSD diagnosis. "We appreciate your service, Commander Webb, but our insurance doesn't cover employees with documented mental health conditions." Liability concerns. I'm sure you understand. Marcus understood perfectly. He was too broken for the military, too damaged for civilian employment, too proud to quit. So he drove home through the desert with $47 and a dog who trusted him to figure it out. The road stretched empty ahead. Nothing but red dirt and scrub brush, and heat mirages that made the horizon shimmer like water. Marcus's hands gripped the steering wheel. Scarred knuckles, calloused palms, the hands of someone who'd worked hard his entire life and had very little to show for it. That's when Ranger changed. The dog's posture shifted in an instant. Alert, focused. His amber eyes locked on something ahead that Marcus couldn't see yet. A low growl rumbled from Ranger's chest. Not fear. Warning. The same sound he'd made in Afghanistan when he detected danger before human senses could. Marcus's pulse quickened automatically. Training kicked in. "What is it?" Ranger's growl intensified. Then Marcus saw it. A black Mercedes G-Wagon appeared through the heat shimmer. Luxury SUV, tinted windows, completely wrong for this desolate road. It was moving slowly, maybe 15 miles per hour, crawling forward like it had all the time in the world. Behind it, dragged on a rope, was a dog. Marcus's brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. He blinked hard, thinking heat exhaustion was causing hallucinations. But no, it was real. An elderly German shepherd, skeletal thin, was being dragged behind the Mercedes. The rope around its neck was tied tight. The dog's legs scrambled weakly, trying to keep pace, failing. Its paws scraped over gravel and dirt, leaving dark streaks that Marcus's military experience recognized instantly. Blood. Jesus Christ! The words came out strangled. Ranger erupted. He barked once, sharp, furious, the sound of a military working dog identifying a threat. Then he lunged against his seatbelt, 75 pounds of muscle and rage, trying to get to the SUV. Marcus's hands moved without conscious thought. He slammed the accelerator. The old Ford protested, engine roaring. But it had one thing the Mercedes didn't need: desperation. The distance closed fast. Through the Mercedes' rear window, Marcus could see movement. 3 figures, young. One was holding something up, a phone on a stabilizer, filming the dog being dragged to death. Marcus's vision tunneled. His breathing went controlled and shallow. The same physiological response he'd had in combat zones. Adrenaline. Focus. The absolute certainty that he was witnessing something evil and had seconds to stop it. He pulled alongside the Mercedes, honking, waving frantically for them to stop. The SUV didn't slow, didn't even acknowledge him. The old dog stumbled, went down. The rope went taut, yanking the animal forward, dragging dead weight now. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He accelerated past the Mercedes, cut in front, and stood on his brakes. His truck skidded sideways, blocking the road completely. The Mercedes had to stop or crash. It stopped. Marcus was out of his truck before the dust settled. Ranger was right behind him. No command needed, pure instinct. The Mercedes' driver door opened. A young woman emerged, mid-20s, long light brown hair and a perfect ponytail, designer sunglasses, yoga pants that probably cost more than Marcus's truck payment. She looked annoyed. Actually annoyed. "What the hell?" Her voice was sharp. "You almost caused an accident." Marcus ignored her. He was already moving toward the back of the SUV, where the old dog lay collapsed on the ground, rope still tight around its neck, sides heaving with desperate breaths. The passenger doors opened. 2 men emerged. The first was built like he lived in a gym. Mid-20s, expensive haircut. Tank top showing off arms that screamed steroids and vanity. He held a professional camera rig, still recording. The second was cleaner cut, styled like a magazine ad. Perfect teeth, perfect skin. He held a phone on a gimbal stabilizer, also recording. "Dude!" The styled one's voice was incredulous. "You just ruined our shot!" "Do you know how hard it is to get the lighting right in this heat?" Marcus knelt beside the old dog. Ranger moved protectively between Marcus and the 3 strangers, a living barrier. The dog's breathing was shallow, rapid. Its tongue lolled from a gray muzzle. Eyes clouded with age and pain. Ribs visible through patchy fur. Paws bloody and raw. Around its neck, the rope had rubbed the skin raw. Beneath the rope, partially hidden, was a faded collar. Marcus's hand shook as he carefully loosened the rope. "Hey!" The woman's voice went shrill. "Don't touch that! That's our property!" Marcus looked up at her. His voice came out flat. Dangerous. "Your property. We bought him legally. $50 from a rescue shelter. We can do what we want with him." The styled man, clearly the leader, stepped forward. "I'm Blake Ashton. Maybe you've heard of me? 2.3 million TikTok followers? We're shooting content for our channel. Extreme survival challenges. The dog was scheduled for euthanasia anyway. We're just documenting his last hours." By dragging him behind your car. It's performance art, social commentary on how society treats the elderly and unwanted. Blake's smile was practiced, rehearsed. The viewers love it. We've already made $12,000 in live donations. Marcus stood slowly. Ranger's growl deepened. $12,000. You're making money watching a dog die. The gym-built cameraman, Trent, based on Blake calling his name earlier, laughed. Bro, that's just the live stream revenue. Wait till we monetize the YouTube upload, TikTok clips, reaction videos. This one piece of content will fund our Maldives trip next month. The woman, Madison, checked her phone. We're up to 14,000 now. Blake, the algorithm is pushing this hard. We might hit 100,000 views before we even finish. Marcus felt something inside him shift. Not anger, something colder, more controlled. The same feeling he'd had in Kandahar when he'd made the decision to charge an enemy position alone to save his team. Absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. Untie the dog. Get in your vehicle. Wait for the police. Blake's smile vanished. Excuse me? I'm calling 911. You're being arrested for animal cruelty. Arizona Revised Statutes 13-2910. Class 5 felony when broadcast for commercial game. You can't be serious. Madison's voice dripped contempt. It's a dog that was going to die anyway. Who cares? I do. Trent stepped forward, aggressive. You know who you're talking to? Blake's family is worth $200 million. We have lawyers, publicists. We will destroy you, make you regret. Ranger's bark cut him off. Not a warning anymore. A promise. Trent backed up fast, hands raised. Whoa, control your dog, man. My dog is controlled. He's just letting you know that if you take another step toward me, he will defend me. Military working dog. Trained to neutralize threats. You want to test him? Blake pulled out his phone. I'm recording this. Threats. Intimidation. Using an attack dog against unarmed citizens. Our lawyer is going to have a field day. Record whatever you want. Marcus already had his phone out, dialing. 911, what's your emergency? The operator answered. 911, what's your emergency? I'm on County Road 47, about 15 miles outside Tucson. I've witnessed animal cruelty in progress. 3 individuals are dragging a dog behind their vehicle for social media content. The dog is severely injured and requires immediate medical attention. The perpetrators are still on scene. Blake's confidence flickered. Wait, you're actually... Suspects are driving a black Mercedes G-Wagon, Arizona plates... Marcus read off the license number. They've been live streaming the abuse. They admit to purchasing the dog specifically to torture it for online revenue. I'm a witness. I'll wait for officers to arrive. The operator's voice shifted. Professional. Urgent. Sir, can you confirm your name? Commander Marcus Webb, U.S. Navy, retired. I'm currently restraining the suspects from fleeing the scene. A pause. Commander Webb? The canine handler who gave the presentation to our sheriff's department last year? Yes, ma'am. Units are already en route. ETA 6 minutes. Stay on the line. Blake's face went pale. You know the cops? I trained their canine unit. They know me. They trust me. And they really hate animal abusers. Madison grabbed Blake's arm. We need to go. Now. This is bad. We can't just leave. Blake, he has our license plate. He knows who we are. We leave now, we can say he's lying, that he assaulted us, that... Marcus stepped between them and their Mercedes. Ranger moved with him, positioned perfectly to intercept if they tried to run. You're not leaving. You're waiting for law enforcement. If you attempt to flee, I will physically detain you until officers arrive. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Trent's bravado crumbled. Dude, we were just making content. It's not that serious. Not that serious? Marcus's voice went quiet. Deadly. That dog is dying. You bought him from a shelter, a place that's supposed to protect animals, and you tortured him. For money, for views, for entertainment. And you're telling me it's not serious? Blake tried a different angle. Look, we can work this out. How much do you want? 5,000? 10? We'll pay you to just walk away. Forget this happened. I don't want your money. Everyone wants money. Name your price. Marcus knelt beside the old dog again. The animal's breathing had steadied slightly, with the rope removed. One cloudy eye opened, found Marcus's face, and in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, trust. Marcus's hand trembled as he gently stroked the dog's head. I'm not leaving you. I promise. The sound of sirens cut through the desert silence. Blake, Madison, and Trent exchanged panicked looks. We have rights. Madison pulled out her phone. I'm calling our lawyer right now. This is wrongful detention, false imprisonment. 2 Pima County Sheriff cruisers appeared, lights flashing. They pulled up fast, doors opening before the vehicles fully stopped. Sheriff Linda Martinez emerged from the first cruiser. She was 50, compact, with the bearing of someone who'd been in law enforcement for 30 years and had seen every kind of human garbage. Her eyes swept the scene. Marcus, Ranger, the 3 influencers, and the old dog bleeding on the ground. Commander Webb. Her voice was respectful. What do we have? Marcus stood. Sheriff Martinez, these 3 individuals purchased this dog from a rescue shelter. For the past 15 minutes, they've been dragging him behind their vehicle while live streaming it to social media. They're monetizing the abuse. The dog has severe injuries. He needs immediate veterinary attention. Martinez approached the old dog, saw the blood, the rope burns, the exhaustion. Her expression went hard. Sweet Jesus, she turned to Blake. Is this true? Blake's lawyer-coached response was immediate. We exercised our legal right to purchase an animal. What we choose to do with our property is protected by... Arizona recognizes animals as sentient beings capable of suffering. Intentionally causing that suffering, especially for commercial gain, is aggravated animal cruelty. Class 5 felony. Martinez gestured to her deputies. Arrest them. What? Madison's voice went shrill. You can't just... We have rights. We have followers. Do you know who Blake's father is? I know exactly who his father is. State Senator Richard Ashton. Which makes this even more interesting. Martinez's smile was cold. Deputy Collins, read them their rights. As deputies moved to handcuff the 3 influencers, Blake's practiced charm evaporated. This is harassment. We'll sue the county. We'll sue you personally. Our lawyer will... Your lawyer will meet you at booking. Until then, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. Trent tried to bolt. Ranger cut him off in 2 strides, positioning himself as a barrier. The deputy grabbed Trent's arms, pulled them behind his back. Don't resist. You're just making it worse. Madison started crying. Not real tears. Performance tears. Please, officer, we didn't mean any harm. It was just for our channel. Our followers expect edgy content. We have to deliver or we lose engagement. Martinez looked at her with contempt. You dragged a dog behind your car for follower engagement. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. As the 3 influencers were loaded into patrol cars, Blake still demanding his lawyer, Madison recording everything on her phone, Trent silent and pale, Martinez knelt beside the old dog. How bad is he? Bad, Marcus said. Internal injuries likely. Severe dehydration. Trauma. He needs a vet. Now. I'll call Dr. Chen. She's 15 minutes away. Martinez looked at Marcus. You did the right thing. Most people would have kept driving. I couldn't. I know. That's what makes you different. She pulled out her radio. Dispatch, I need animal rescue transport to County Road 47. Injured dog. Critical condition. While they waited, Marcus sat with the old dog. Ranger lay down beside the animal, close enough to share body heat, and the old dog, despite everything it had endured, shifted slightly closer to Ranger, finding comfort in the presence of another of its kind. Marcus noticed something. The old dog's collar, beneath the rope, had a faded tag. He leaned closer, read the worn text. Zeus, Phoenix PDK-9 Unit, retired, 2019. Marcus's breath caught. He's a police dog. Martinez leaned over, read the tag. Her expression shifted from anger to something else. Grief. Zeus. I remember him. His handler was Officer David Chen. Died of cancer 5 years ago. The family couldn't keep Zeus. He ended up in the shelter system. A police dog. He spent his entire life protecting people. And when he needed protection, no one was there. Martinez's voice was tight. Until you. The vet arrived in a white van marked Emergency Animal Services. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Zeus's former handler, was young, efficient, the kind of professional who'd chosen veterinary medicine because she genuinely cared. She examined Zeus quickly, professionally. Broken ribs, severe lacerations on the paws, dehydration, possible internal bleeding. He needs surgery, now. Will he make it? Marcus asked. Dr. Chen looked at Zeus, at his age, at the extent of his injuries. I don't know. He's 12 years old. That's ancient for a working dog. His body, it's already worn out. This trauma on top of everything else. She met Marcus's eyes. I'll do everything I can, but you should prepare yourself. As Dr. Chen and her assistant carefully loaded Zeus into the van, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. Sheriff Martinez. Commander, I need a formal statement. Everything you saw, everything they said. This is going to trial, and your testimony is critical. Whatever you need. Also, Martinez hesitated. The live stream, it's already viral. 20 million views and climbing. Your confrontation with them is all over social media. News outlets are picking it up. You're about to become very famous, very fast. Marcus looked at his beat-up truck, at Ranger, at the $47 in his bank account. I didn't do this for fame. I know, but that doesn't change what's coming. Blake Ashton's family has money, power, and a PR machine that specializes in making problems disappear. You just became their biggest problem. As the vet van drove away with Zeus, as the patrol cars left with Blake and his crew, as the desert heat finally began to ease with approaching evening, Marcus stood on that empty road with Ranger and felt the weight of what he'd just set in motion. He'd wanted to save one dog, that was all. Just one life that mattered to nobody but him. What he didn't know yet was that the world was watching. That the video of his confrontation would be shared 40 million times by morning. That his name, his face, his entire history would be dissected by strangers. That Blake's $200 million family would declare war on a broke veteran who dared to challenge them. That the simple act of refusing to drive past suffering would make Marcus Webb either a hero or a target. Or both. Marcus didn't go home that night. He sat in the veterinary clinic parking lot with Ranger, both of them waiting for news about Zeus. Dr. Chen had said the surgery would take hours. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, organs stressed beyond what a 12-year-old body could easily repair. Ranger hadn't moved from his position in the passenger seat. He stared at the clinic door like he could will Zeus to walk out healthy. I know, boy. I'm worried too. Marcus's phone had been buzzing non-stop since Sheriff Martinez mentioned the video going viral. He'd ignored it for 2 hours. Finally, curiosity won. He picked it up. 372 missed calls. Text messages filling his screen so fast the phone struggled to load them. His email inbox had crashed, and on social media, platforms he barely used. His name was everywhere. Hashtag Navy SEAL Rescue was trending #1 on Twitter. The video of his confrontation with Blake had 43 million views. 43 million! People were calling him a hero, an angel, proof that good people still existed. But other voices were louder. Blake's followers, millions of them, were calling Marcus a vigilante, an unstable veteran who'd assaulted innocent content creators, someone who clearly had PTSD and couldn't distinguish between enemy combatants and young entrepreneurs. Marcus's hands shook as he read comment after comment dissecting his mental health, his service record, his right to intervene. Someone had found his address, posted it publicly. His landlord was already calling. "Mr. Webb, I've got reporters camped outside the building. Residents are complaining. You need to handle this. Today." Marcus's sister Jennifer called from Virginia. Her voice was frantic. "Marcus, what the hell is happening? CNN is calling me. They found me through Mom and Dad's obituary. They want to interview me about whether you've always been this heroic, or if the war changed you." "Jen, I just stopped some people from killing a dog." "You confronted the son of a state senator. Blake Ashton's father is Richard Ashton. He sits on the Armed Services Committee. He has connections to the Pentagon, the VA, every level of government that controls veteran benefits." Jennifer's voice cracked. "Marcus, these people can destroy you. They have money for lawyers, publicists, private investigators. And you have $47. "How do you know I have $47? "Because I'm your emergency contact, and your bank called me when your account got flagged for suspicious activity. Apparently thousands of people are trying to send you money, and the bank thinks it's fraud." Marcus pulled up his banking app. His checking account, which had shown $47 that morning, now displayed $63,412. His heart stopped. "What? People set up a GoFundMe for you. Support Navy SEAL who stood up to animal abusers. It raised $60,000 in 6 hours. The bank froze it until they could verify it's legitimate." Jennifer's voice softened. "Marcus, the world is watching you. And I mean the entire world. BBC is covering this. Al Jazeera. You're international news." Marcus looked at Ranger, who looked back with patient confusion. "I just wanted to save a dog." "I know, but you didn't just save a dog. You challenged people who represent everything wrong with internet culture. Rich kids who'll do anything for views, who see living beings as props, who profit from suffering. People are rallying behind you because you did what they wish they'd have the courage to do." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Chen emerged from the clinic. Her scrubs were blood-stained. Her face was exhausted, but not defeated. Marcus was out of the truck before she reached the door. "How is he?" "Alive, barely. We repaired the internal bleeding, set the ribs, treated the lacerations. But Marcus," Dr. Chen's professionalism wavered. "He's old. His organs are failing. Not from the abuse, from age. He maybe has weeks left, maybe days. I can keep him comfortable, but I can't make him young again." "Can I see him?" "He's sedated. Won't wake up until tomorrow morning, but yes, come on." Marcus followed her inside. Ranger stayed close, his nails clicking on the linoleum floor. Zeus lay on a padded bed in the recovery room, wrapped in blankets, IV lines running from his leg. Without the rope, without the blood and dirt, he looked smaller, fragile, an old soldier who'd given everything and had nothing left. Marcus knelt beside him. Ranger approached carefully, sniffed Zeus, then lay down against the bed. Guard position. Protecting a fallen comrade. "He was a police dog," Marcus said quietly. "Phoenix PD. Served for 8 years. His handler died of cancer. The family couldn't afford to keep him." Dr. Chen checked Zeus's vitals. "So he spent his whole life protecting people. And when he got old, when he needed protection..." He ended up in a kill shelter, where Blake Ashton bought him for $50 to drag behind a Mercedes for TikTok views. The world is broken, Dr. Chen said. But you fixed a small part of it today. That matters. Marcus's phone rang. Sheriff Martinez. Commander, we've got a problem. Blake's lawyer just arrived at the station. Mason Carr. He's the best criminal defense attorney in Arizona. Represents politicians, celebrities, anyone with enough money to buy their way out of consequences. He's already filing motions to suppress the video evidence, claiming it was obtained through illegal surveillance. I recorded it on my personal phone, on a public road. That's legal. He's arguing you coerced his clients into staying at the scene. False imprisonment. Unlawful detention. He's spinning it like you're the criminal and they're the victims. Marcus felt heat rise behind his eyes. They were dragging a dog to death for money. I know. But Carr is good at making juries forget facts and focus on feelings. He'll make Blake look like a misunderstood artist. Make you look like an aggressive veteran with PTSD who overreacted. Martinez paused. He's also filing a civil suit. Defamation, emotional distress, loss of income. Blake's sponsors are dropping him because of the backlash. They're calculating damages at $2 million. $2 million? Marcus looked at the $60,000 in his bank account. Money from strangers who believed in him. It wouldn't last 2 weeks against lawyers who billed $800 an hour. What do I do? You get a lawyer, a good one. I can recommend. I can't afford a lawyer, Sheriff. I'm unemployed, living on disability. I don't have resources to fight a $2 million lawsuit. Then you better find resources fast, because Mason Carr doesn't lose. And Blake's father is already making calls, putting pressure on the DA to drop the criminal charges, putting pressure on the VA to investigate whether you're fit to own a service dog, putting pressure on everyone who can hurt you. After Martinez hung up, Marcus sat in that recovery room with Zeus and Ranger and felt the walls closing in. He'd done the right thing. He knew that. But right didn't always win. Money won. Power won. And he had neither. Dr. Chen brought him coffee. You look like you need this. I need a miracle. You already got one. Zeus is alive. For how long? Days? And then what? I go bankrupt fighting lawsuits while Blake walks free because his daddy's a senator? Dr. Chen sat down beside him. Can I tell you something? I've been a vet for 8 years. I've seen hundreds of animals abused, neglected, killed. And you know how many times someone actually stopped to help? Twice, including you. Everyone else just drives past. They see suffering and they decide it's not their problem, not their responsibility, not worth the risk. Maybe they're smarter than me. Or maybe they're just more afraid. You weren't afraid, even knowing you'd face consequences. Even knowing these people had power. You stopped. You stood between cruelty and its victim. That's not stupidity. That's courage. Marcus didn't feel courageous. He felt exhausted, broke, outmatched. His phone rang again. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Commander Webb? This is Andrea Liu. I'm an attorney with the Animal Legal Defense Fund. We're a nonprofit that handles cases involving animal cruelty and abuse. I've been following your situation. I'd like to offer our services pro bono. Marcus's throat tightened. Pro bono? Free? Completely free. We handle the civil defense, the criminal case support, everything. Blake Ashton and his crew violated not just Arizona law, but federal statutes regarding animal welfare and commercial exploitation. We've been trying to build a case against influencers who abuse animals for content. You just handed us the perfect plaintiff. I'm not a plaintiff. I'm just a guy who stopped to help a dog. You're a witness to a crime that's been viewed by 50 million people. You have documentation, testimony, law enforcement support, and most importantly, You have moral authority. The public believes you. They trust you. That makes you powerful. I don't want to be powerful. I just want Zeus to survive and Blake to face justice. Then let us help you. We'll handle Mason Carr and his billable hours. We'll protect you from the civil suit, and we'll make sure Blake faces actual consequences instead of buying his way out. Andrea paused. Marcus, this is bigger than one dog. This is about setting precedent, about showing influencers they can't torture animals for content without facing federal charges. We can change laws, but only if you're willing to fight. Marcus looked at Zeus, at the old police dog who'd given everything and been discarded. At Ranger, who'd never once questioned whether Marcus was worth protecting. Okay, I'll fight. Good. I'm flying to Tucson tomorrow. We'll meet, strategize, and start building a case that Mason Carr can't dismiss or buy. After Andrea hung up, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Fragile. Uncertain, but real. Dr. Chen smiled. See? Miracles. That night, Marcus slept in his truck in the clinic parking lot. Ranger curled up in the passenger seat. They'd slept in worse places. Afghanistan, Iraq. A dozen forward operating bases where comfort meant a cot without bullet holes. He woke to his phone ringing at 6 a.m. Jennifer. Marcus, turn on the news, any channel. He pulled up a news app. The top story across every network. Blake Ashton's father resigns from Senate Armed Services Committee amid animal abuse scandal. State Senator Richard Ashton had resigned overnight, citing family matters that require my full attention. But the real reason was in the secondary headlines. Senator Ashton's campaign received $400,000 from animal agriculture lobbyists, while his son abused animals for profit. The optics were toxic. A senator who took money from industries that depended on public trust regarding animal welfare, while his son dragged dogs behind luxury cars for TikTok revenue. Marcus read the statement Richard Ashton released. My son's actions do not reflect our family's values. I am deeply disappointed and committed to ensuring he faces appropriate consequences for his choices. He's throwing Blake under the bus, Jennifer said, saving his own career by sacrificing his son. Good. Maybe Blake will actually face justice. But the news wasn't finished. A second story broke an hour later. Investigation reveals Blake Ashton's pattern of animal abuse content. A data analyst named Kevin Park had spent the night combing through Blake's entire content history, found 7 previous videos involving animal abuse. A cat forced to swim for an endurance challenge. A rabbit locked in a box for 24 hours. A hamster run to exhaustion. Each video monetized. Each animal purchased from shelters, abused for content, then euthanized to eliminate witnesses. Blake had made an estimated $340,000 from animal suffering over 18 months. The internet erupted. Sponsors didn't just drop Blake. They publicly denounced him. YouTube demonetized his channel. TikTok banned his account. Instagram suspended him for violating community guidelines. Madison and Trent, the 2 accomplices, released statements through their lawyers claiming they were misled by Blake and didn't know the extent of the abuse. Both were trying to negotiate plea deals, offering to testify against Blake in exchange for reduced charges. Marcus watched it all unfold from the clinic parking lot. Watched Blake's empire collapse in real time. Watched millions of followers become millions of critics. But he also watched the backlash. Blake's remaining supporters, conspiracy theorists, anti-government activists, people who saw Marcus as a symbol of state overreach, started attacking. Death threats flooded Marcus's voicemail. His address was posted on forums. Someone claimed to have found his sister's workplace. Jennifer called again, terrified. Marcus, someone showed up at my school. Asked my students about my brother. The principal called the police. I'm scared. Go stay with Aunt Marie. Get out of town for a few days. What about you? I'm fine. I've got Ranger. I've got Sheriff Martinez watching my back. And I'm not leaving Zeus. At 8 a.m., Dr. Chen came out to the parking lot. He's awake, asking for you. Marcus didn't know how a dog could ask for someone, but when he entered the recovery room, Zeus's cloudy eyes found his face immediately. Recognition. The old dog's tail moved weakly, not a wag, just acknowledgement. Marcus knelt beside the bed. Zeus shifted, pressed his gray muzzle into Marcus's hand. The same gesture from yesterday. Trust earned through action, not words. Ranger lay down on the other side of Zeus's bed, creating warmth, companionship. The silent language of dogs who understood suffering and survival. Dr. Chen checked Zeus's vitals. He's stable, eating a little. The pain medication is helping. But Marcus, his kidneys are failing. The trauma-accelerated organ decline. We can keep him comfortable for maybe a week, maybe 2, but after that... I understand. Do you want to make arrangements? Find him a foster? Some people specialize in hospice care for... No, he stays with me. However long he has left, he doesn't spend it with strangers. Dr. Chen's eyes watered. You can't afford that. The medical care alone will cost thousands. Daily medications, monitoring, eventual euthanasia. I'll figure it out. Marcus, you're unemployed. You're facing a $2 million lawsuit. You can't... I said I'll figure it out. Marcus's voice was firm. He spent his entire life protecting people. He deserves to spend his last days being protected. I'm not letting him die alone in a clinic. Dr. Chen nodded. Okay, I'll get the discharge paperwork ready. But you'll need to bring him back every 3 days for checkups. And if he deteriorates, I'll bring him back. I promise. At noon, Andrea Liu arrived at the clinic. She was 40, sharp-eyed, dressed in a suit that said, I've won cases you've only read about. She carried a briefcase full of documents and the confidence of someone who'd spent 20 years making powerful people uncomfortable. Commander Webb, thank you for meeting with me. They sat in Dr. Manton-Follow Chen's office. Marcus, Andrea, Sheriff Martinez, who'd arrived to provide official testimony, and Ranger, who refused to leave Marcus's side. Andrea laid out the strategy. Blake Ashton and his accomplices are facing multiple charges: animal cruelty, operating a criminal enterprise, tax evasion. They didn't report the income from these videos. We're building a federal RICO case. RICO? That's organized crime law. Which is exactly what this is. Blake ran a systematic operation, purchased animals specifically to abuse them, created content designed to generate revenue through shock value, recruited accomplices, monetized the suffering. That's racketeering. Sheriff Martinez added, the DA is under pressure to drop the state charges. Blake's father called in favors. But federal charges? Those are harder to kill. U.S. Attorney's Office is very interested in making an example. What about the civil suit? The $2 million Mason Carr is demanding. Andrea smiled. Mason Carr is good, but he's used to intimidating people who can't fight back. We're filing a countersuit, malicious prosecution, abusive process, and we're going after Blake's assets. Freeze them as proceeds from criminal activity. Can't pay lawyers when your bank accounts are seized. Marcus felt the weight on his chest lighten slightly. You can actually do that? We can, and we will. But Marcus, I need to be honest. This is going to be brutal. Mason Carr will attack your character, your mental health, your service record. He'll claim you're an unstable veteran who misunderstood a performance art piece. He'll parade expert witnesses who'll testify Blake's actions were protected speech. How do we fight that? With the truth. With Zeus's medical record showing systematic abuse. with Blake's own admissions on video, with his pattern of behavior across multiple incidents, and most importantly, with you, the decorated Navy SEAL who risked everything to save a dying dog. Juries love heroes, and you, Commander Webb, are undeniably heroic. Marcus didn't feel heroic. He felt tired, scared, in over his head. But he looked at Zeus, at the old police dog sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knows how long, and knew he couldn't back down. What do you need from me? Your testimony, your documentation, and your commitment to seeing this through no matter how ugly it gets. Because it will get ugly. Blake's team will dig up everything about you, every mistake, every failure, every moment of PTSD. They'll use your pain against you. Let them try. I've survived worse than lawyers. Andrea extended her hand. Then we have a deal. I'll handle the legal war. You handle staying strong and keeping that dog alive. Deal? Deal. As Andrea left to file motions and prepare for battle, as Sheriff Martinez headed back to coordinate with federal prosecutors, as Dr. Chen prepared Zeus's discharge papers, Marcus sat alone with Ranger and felt the full weight of what he'd started. He'd wanted to save one dog. Instead, he'd sparked a national conversation about animal abuse, influencer culture, and whether internet fame justified cruelty. He'd made enemies of people with unlimited resources. He'd put his sister in danger. He'd risked everything he had, which admittedly wasn't much, for a principle. And he'd do it again, without hesitation. Because some things mattered more than safety, more than money, more than avoiding conflict. Zeus mattered. Every animal Blake had tortured mattered. And if Marcus had to fight a war he couldn't afford, against enemies he couldn't beat, so be it. He'd been trained for impossible odds, had survived firefights where the math said he should have died, had pulled teammates from burning vehicles when logic said to run. This was just another impossible fight, another moment where doing the right thing meant accepting terrible consequences. Marcus stood, stretched muscles sore from sleeping in his truck. Ranger stood with him, mirroring his movement. Come on, boy. Let's go home. We've got a guest to take care of. And as they walked out of that clinic with Zeus, sedated and fragile, but alive, Marcus understood that he'd crossed a line he could never uncross. The world was watching now. Millions of people had opinions about what he'd done, about whether he was hero or vigilante, saint or fool. But only one opinion mattered. The old police dog who'd spent his final days being dragged behind a Mercedes until someone finally stopped. Until someone finally said, "Not on my watch. Not while I can still fight." And Marcus Webb, broke, exhausted, outmatched in every measurable way, would keep fighting until Zeus's last breath or his own, whichever came first. Marcus's apartment was small, one bedroom that he'd converted into a space for Ranger, leaving himself the couch. Rent was $800 a month for 400 square feet of peeling linoleum and water-stained walls. His landlord, Mr. Kowalski, was waiting outside when Marcus pulled up with Zeus in the truck bed, carefully secured on blankets. "Mr. Webb," Kowalski's voice was apologetic but firm. "We need to talk." "I know. The reporters. I'm handling it." "It's not just the reporters. It's the police showing up 3 times a day because someone called in a false threat. It's the other tenants complaining they can't get to their apartments without being harassed. It's—" Kowalski looked at Zeus, at the elderly dog barely conscious in the truck bed. His expression softened. "You're a good man. I know that. But I got 20 other families here. I can't have this chaos." Marcus felt the ground shift under him. "Are you evicting me?" "I'm asking you to find somewhere else. I'll give you 2 weeks. That's the best I can do. 2 weeks. To find a new apartment while unemployed, while caring for a dying dog, while fighting a legal battle against people with unlimited resources. Understood. 2 weeks. Marcus carried Zeus inside. The old dog weighed maybe 60 pounds, nothing but bones and fur and the fading remnants of muscle that had once chased down suspects and protected his handler. Ranger followed, immediately positioning himself near Zeus's makeshift bed, a pile of blankets Marcus had arranged in the corner. Dr. Chen had sent Marcus home with medications, instructions, and a warning. He's going to decline fast. Days, not weeks. When the time comes, call me. I'll come to you. He deserves to go peacefully. At home. Home. Marcus looked around his apartment. At the bare walls. The second-hand furniture. The refrigerator held 3 eggs and half a loaf of bread. His bank account showed $63,000 from strangers who believed he was a hero. But he couldn't touch it yet. Bank fraud investigation, verification protocols, bureaucracy moving at the speed of molasses. His phone rang. Andrea Liu. Marcus, we've got a problem. Mason Carr just filed an emergency motion claiming you're harboring stolen property. He's arguing Zeus belongs to Blake Ashton because Blake purchased him legally. He's demanding Zeus be surrendered to Blake's custody immediately. Marcus's blood went cold. He wants to give Zeus back to Blake? After what he did? It's a tactical move. He knows you're emotionally attached. He's trying to force you into a mistake. Either you surrender Zeus and look heartless, or you refuse, and he paints you as someone who doesn't respect property rights. Andrea's voice was tight with controlled anger. But we're not giving them anything. I filed a counter-motion arguing Zeus is evidence in an active criminal investigation and cannot be returned to the defendant. Judge will rule tomorrow. What if the judge sides with Blake? Then we appeal. And we keep appealing until we find a judge who isn't intimidated by Mason Carr's reputation. After hanging up, Marcus sat on the floor beside Zeus. The old dog's breathing was shallow but steady. His eyes opened briefly, found Marcus, then closed again. Trust. Even in pain, even barely conscious, Zeus trusted that Marcus wouldn't let him be hurt again. Ranger settled on Zeus's other side. 2 military working dogs, one retired and dying, one still fighting, finding companionship in shared understanding. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. You think you're a hero? You're just a broke loser who assaulted successful entrepreneurs. Wait until we're done with you. You'll wish you'd kept driving. Another text, different number. Your sister Jennifer teaches at Riverside Elementary, right? Pretty school. Be a shame if something happened there. Marcus's hands shook. They were threatening Jennifer. Actually threatening his sister to intimidate him into backing down. He called Sheriff Martinez. They're making threats. Against my sister. Against me. I've got screenshots. Forward them to me. We'll investigate. But Marcus, these are probably burner phones. Disposable. Untraceable. Blake's team knows how to harass without leaving evidence. So what do I do? You document everything. You don't engage, and you let us handle it. I have already contacted Virginia State Police. They're increasing patrols around Jennifer's school. She's safe. But was she? Was anyone safe when you challenged people who saw laws as suggestions and morality as weakness? The next morning, Marcus woke to Ranger's low growl. Alert. Warning. Someone was at the door. Knocking. Not police knock. Too tentative. Marcus checked the peephole. A woman stood there. 50s. Graying hair. Nervous eyes. She held a small dog carrier. Marcus opened the door cautiously. Can I help you? Commander Webb. My name is Patricia Morrison. I saw the news about what you did for Zeus, and I needed to talk to someone who might understand. Her voice cracked. Blake Ashton didn't just abuse Zeus. He abused my dog, too. 6 months ago. Marcus stepped aside. Come in. Patricia entered, set the carrier down. Inside was a small terrier mix, maybe 8 pounds, with 3 legs and scars across its back. "This is Muffin. I got her from a shelter 3 years ago. Best decision I ever made. But 6 months ago, she got out of my yard. I searched everywhere. Called shelters, posted on social media. Nothing." Patricia wiped her eyes. "Then a week later, someone sent me a video. Blake Ashton's channel. He'd found Muffin, called it a survival challenge, made her swim in a pool for 2 hours straight while his followers donated money to see how long she'd last." Marcus felt sick. "Did you report it?" "I tried. Called the police. They said since Blake claimed he found her as a stray, and since he'd already had her euthanized by the time I called, there was no evidence, no case. They told me to move on." Patricia knelt beside the carrier. "But it wasn't Muffin. He'd lied about euthanizing her. He dumped her at a different shelter 3 counties away. Took me 2 months to find her. By then, she'd lost a leg to infection from injuries he'd caused." "Patricia, this is evidence, proof of a pattern. Andrea Liu, my lawyer, she needs to hear this." "I'm scared. Blake's father threatened me. Said if I went public, they'd sue me for defamation. Ruin my credit. Make sure I lost my job." Patricia looked at Zeus, at the old dog sleeping peacefully. "But seeing what you did, stopping for Zeus even though it cost you everything, I realized I can't stay silent. Not if it means more animals suffer." Marcus called Andrea immediately. Within 2 hours, Patricia was giving a formal statement. Within 4 hours, Andrea had found 3 more victims. People whose pets had been stolen or purchased by Blake, abused for content, then disposed of. Each story was the same. Attempts to report were dismissed or intimidated into silence. Blake's family wealth and political connections made him untouchable. Until now. Andrea called that afternoon, her voice electric with purpose. "Marcus, we're not just building a criminal case anymore. We're building a federal class action. Multiple victims, pattern of abuse spanning 2 years. Estimated $250,000 in revenue from animal suffering. Blake Ashton didn't just abuse animals. He ran a criminal enterprise." "Can you win? With this evidence? With victims willing to testify? With your testimony tying it all together? Yes, we can win. But Marcus, Blake's team knows we're getting stronger. They're going to escalate, attack harder, get desperate." Andrea was right. That evening, Mason Carr held a press conference. Blake stood beside him, dressed in a modest suit, hair styled conservatively, the image of a contrite young man who'd made mistakes. "I want to apologize," Blake read from a prepared statement, "to the animals I hurt, to the people I disappointed, to everyone who trusted me to use my platform responsibly. I was young. I was stupid. I chased views and money without thinking about consequences. But I'm getting help. I'm in therapy. I'm committed to making amends." Carr took over. "My client recognizes his errors in judgment. He's prepared to accept responsibility through community service, donations to animal welfare organizations, and a public commitment to never create this type of content again. However, we cannot accept the vigilante justice enacted by Commander Marcus Webb, whose violent confrontation and theft of my client's property." Marcus turned off the TV. Couldn't watch anymore. Blake was playing the redemption card. The troubled young man who'd seen the error of his ways. The media would eat it up. Some would, anyway. But the internet wasn't buying it. Kevin Park, the data analyst who'd exposed Blake's pattern, released another bombshell that night. He'd found Blake's private Discord server, a place where Blake and other extreme content creators traded tips on which shelters had the loosest adoption protocols, which animals were cheapest, how to avoid animal cruelty charges by claiming artistic intent. The server had 43 members, all influencers, all creating content that involved animal suffering for profit. The FBI announced they were opening an investigation into organized animal abuse for commercial gain. Not just Blake, the entire network. Blake's apology disappeared under the weight of new evidence, showing this wasn't one young man's mistake. It was a coordinated system of exploitation. Marcus's phone rang at midnight. Andrea. The judge ruled on the emergency motion. Zeus stays with you. Blake has no legal claim to him because purchasing an animal with intent to abuse it voids the transaction under Arizona law. She paused. But there's more. The U.S. attorney is filing federal charges tomorrow. Animal crushing statutes, wire fraud, racketeering. Blake is looking at 20 years in federal prison. 20 years. For a kid who'd probably never faced real consequences in his life. How's he going to react? Badly. People like Blake don't accept consequences. They escalate. Be careful, Marcus. Watch your back. Andrea's warning proved prophetic. At 2 a.m., Marcus woke to breaking glass. Someone had thrown a brick through his apartment window. Attached was a note. Drop the charges, or next time, it's a Molotov cocktail. Marcus called 911. Police arrived, documented the threat, but offered little hope. No witnesses, no cameras. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Rangers stood guard the rest of the night. Marcus didn't sleep, just sat with Zeus, listening to the old dog breathe, wondering how long he could keep this up before something broke. Morning brought a different kind of attack. Mason Carr released Marcus's sealed military medical records to the press. Records that were supposed to be protected by privacy laws. Records detailing his PTSD diagnosis, his treatment history, his struggles adjusting to civilian life. The headlines were brutal. Hero or unstable? Navy SEAL's mental health history raises questions. News segments debated whether someone with PTSD could accurately assess situations. Whether Marcus had overreacted to street performers doing edgy art. Whether his heroism was actually trauma response. Jennifer called, crying. Marcus, they're destroying you. They're making you look crazy. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I know that, but they're planting doubt, making people question whether Zeus was really being abused or whether you misunderstood performance art because of your PTSD. Marcus looked at Zeus, at the scars, the broken ribs that showed on x-rays, the medical evidence that didn't lie. The evidence doesn't care about my mental health. Zeus's injuries are real. Blake's admissions are on video. The truth doesn't change because they attacked my credibility. But doubt spread anyway. Social media split into factions. Hashtag I stand with Marcus versus hashtag Blake is innocent. The story became less about animal abuse and more about whether a traumatized veteran could be trusted. Dr. Chen called that afternoon. Marcus, Zeus is declining. His kidney function is dropping. We need to think about end-of-life care. Soon. How soon? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. I'm sorry. Marcus knelt beside Zeus. The old dog's breathing had become labored, painful. His eyes opened, found Marcus, and in them was something that broke Marcus's heart. Gratitude. Zeus was grateful for these last days, for dying in warmth instead of on a desert road, for knowing kindness before the end. You're a good boy, Marcus whispered. The best. You served your whole life, protected people, did everything right. And I'm so sorry they hurt you. So sorry you suffered. Zeus's tail moved weakly. Forgiveness, maybe. Or just acknowledgement that Marcus had tried. That evening, Andrea called with unexpected news. Mason Carr just withdrew from Blake's defense team. What? Why? Blake's father stopped paying him. Richard Ashton is cutting ties with his son completely, protecting his own political future by sacrificing Blake. Without Carr, Blake's defense collapses. His new court-appointed attorney is competent, but not a miracle worker. So we win? The criminal case? Probably. Blake will face real time. But Marcus, there's something else. Trent Morrison and Madison Sterling, Blake's accomplices. They're both offering to testify against him. They've given depositions describing how Blake specifically targeted old or sick dogs because they were cheaper and easier to abuse. How he calculated revenue per minute of animal suffering. How he laughed about people who tried to report him because his father made complaints disappear. Marcus felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion. When does the trial start? 6 weeks. U.S. Attorney wants you to testify. Your confrontation, your documentation, your care of Zeus. You're the emotional center of this case. The jury needs to see you. I'll be there. If Zeus... His voice caught. If Zeus is still alive, I'll be there. But Zeus wasn't waiting for trials or justice or vindication. 3 days later, on a quiet morning when the sun came through Marcus's broken window in soft gold light, Zeus stopped eating, stopped drinking. His breathing became shallow, then shallower. Dr. Chen came to the apartment, examined him, met Marcus's eyes with professional compassion that couldn't hide the truth. It's time. His body is shutting down. We can keep him comfortable for maybe another day, but he's suffering, and he's ready. Marcus nodded, couldn't speak. Ranger pressed against his leg, offering silent support. Dr. Chen prepared the injection. Do you want to hold him? Marcus gathered Zeus carefully. The old police dog fit against his chest like he'd always belonged there. His gray muzzle rested on Marcus's shoulder, his breathing soft against Marcus's neck. Ranger lay down beside them, his head on Zeus's back paw. 3 warriors, 2 still fighting, 1 ready to rest. You're safe, Marcus whispered. You're home. And you're loved. That's all that matters. You're loved. Dr. Chen administered the injection. Zeus's breathing eased. The pain left his eye, and then, gently, peacefully, he was gone. Marcus held him for a long time after. Ranger didn't move, just maintained his vigil, honoring a fellow soldier who'd served with honor and died with dignity. When Marcus finally let Dr. Chen take Zeus's body for cremation, when he finally stood and felt the weight of exhaustion and grief settle into his bones, he understood something profound. Zeus had won, not by surviving, by being remembered, by being valued in death when he'd been discarded in life, by proving that one person refusing to look away could change everything. Marcus's phone buzzed. Andrea. Marcus, I just heard about Zeus. I'm so sorry. He's at peace, finally. There's something you should know. Blake's trial date was moved up. 2 weeks. The prosecution wants to use Zeus's medical records, your testimony, everything. They want justice for him. Marcus looked at the empty corner where Zeus had spent his last days, at the blanket still holding the shape of an old dog who'd given everything and asked nothing. Then Zeus gets justice, and Blake gets exactly what he deserves. And for the first time since this all started, Marcus felt certain. Not about winning, not about vindication, but about purpose. He'd saved Zeus's life for a few days, but Zeus had saved Marcus's soul, had reminded him that standing up to evil mattered. That powerless didn't mean hopeless, that sometimes the right thing was also the hardest thing. And Marcus Webb, broke, grieving, outmatched in every way, was ready to finish what he'd started on that desert road. Ready to make sure Zeus's suffering wasn't forgotten. That Blake's crimes weren't dismissed. That justice wasn't just for people with money and power. This was personal now, and Marcus had nothing left to lose except his integrity, which meant he'd already won. Marcus buried Zeus's ashes in a small memorial garden behind Dr. Chen's clinic. She'd offered the space without being asked, understanding that some debts couldn't be repaid with money. The marker was simple: a smooth river stone with Zeus's name and badge number engraved by a local veteran who'd heard the story and refused payment. Ranger sat vigil during the brief ceremony. Marcus, Dr. Chen, Sheriff Martinez, and Andrea Liu were the only attendees. No media, no cameras. Just people who understood that this old police dog had mattered, that his death meant something beyond headlines and hashtags. He gave his whole life protecting people, Sheriff Martinez said quietly. Least we can do is make sure his death protects others. Andrea placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. The trial starts tomorrow. You ready? Marcus looked at the fresh-turned earth where Zeus's ashes rested. I'm ready. But the next morning, sitting in the federal courthouse waiting to testify, Marcus felt anything but ready. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Animal rights activists wore shirts with Zeus's face. Blake's remaining supporters held signs reading, "Performance art isn't a crime," and "Stop persecuting creative expression." Blake sat at the defense table looking nothing like the cocky influencer from the desert road. His new lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named James Riley, had dressed him in a conservative suit, styled his hair modestly, coached his expressions into something resembling remorse. Trent Morrison and Madison Sterling had already testified for the prosecution. Both had taken plea deals, reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. Both had described in clinical detail how Blake specifically sought out old or sick animals because they were cheaper and generated more engagement when viewers watched them suffer. Madison's testimony had been particularly damning. Blake calculated revenue per minute of animal distress. He'd say things like, "The cat swimming video made $250 per minute, but the rabbit suffocation made $400. We need to find content that maximizes suffering without killing them too fast, because dead animals don't generate donations." The prosecution had built a meticulous case. Financial records showing $247,000 in revenue from animal abuse content. Video evidence of 7 separate incidents. Medical records from veterinarians documenting injuries consistent with systematic torture. But Blake's defense had one strategy: destroy Marcus's credibility. When Marcus was called to testify, when he stood and walked to the witness stand with Ranger at his side, the judge had granted special permission for the service dog to be present. He felt every eye in the courtroom measuring him, judging whether he was hero or damaged veteran, or something in between. The prosecution went first. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, led Marcus through his testimony with professional precision. Commander Webb, can you describe what you witnessed on County Road 47 on the afternoon of March 15th? Marcus took a breath. I was driving home from a job interview. My canine partner, Ranger, alerted to something ahead. I saw a black Mercedes SUV moving slowly. Behind it, dragged on a rope, was an elderly German shepherd. The dog was barely conscious, bleeding, struggling to stay upright. What did you do? I pulled alongside the Mercedes, honked, waved for them to stop. They ignored me, so I cut in front and forced them to stop. Why did you feel the need to intervene? Because an animal was dying, being tortured, and no one else was going to help. Sarah Chen pulled up the video on the courtroom screen. The confrontation played out in full. Blake's admission that he'd purchased Zeus for $50. His calculation of donation revenue. His dismissal of Zeus as scheduled for euthanasia anyway. Commander, what was your emotional state during this confrontation? I was angry, but controlled. I've been trained to manage stress in combat situations. This was no different. Did you threaten Mr. Ashton or his associates? I told them I was calling the police. I told them I would prevent them from leaving the scene. That's not a threat. That's a citizen detaining suspects until law enforcement arrives. Sarah Chen nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Then Blake's attorney stood. James Riley was young, maybe 35, with the hungry look of a public defender who'd handled too many cases with too few resources. But he was smart. Marcus could see it in his eyes. Commander Webb, you testified you were angry during this confrontation. How angry? Angry enough to intervene, not angry enough to lose control. You have PTSD, correct? Post-traumatic stress disorder from your military service? Andrea objected. Relevance, Your Honor? I'm establishing the witness's state of mind, Riley argued. His ability to accurately perceive and report events. The judge allowed it. Marcus's jaw tightened. Yes, I have PTSD, from 5 deployments to combat zones where I watched teammates die. And PTSD can cause flashbacks, correct? Moments where you misperceive civilian situations as combat threats? That's not what happened. But it could happen, couldn't it? A veteran with PTSD, seeing a young person filming content, could misinterpret performance art as abuse because his trauma makes him hypervigilant? I know the difference between performance art and animal cruelty. Zeus had broken ribs, lacerations, organ damage from systematic abuse. That's not art. That's torture. Riley pulled up Marcus's sealed medical records on screen. Records that should never have been made public. Your treatment notes from the VA describe paranoia, hypervigilance, difficulty distinguishing appropriate from inappropriate threat responses. Isn't it possible you overreacted to what was actually a misunderstood artistic statement? Marcus leaned forward. I watched your client drag a dying dog behind a $150,000 car for TikTok donations. I watched him admit on camera that he purchased that dog to torture it for profit. I watched him laugh while Zeus bled out on the desert road. That's not misperception. That's documentation. But your PTSD makes you prone to overreaction. My PTSD makes me unwilling to ignore suffering. There's a difference. You were unemployed at the time of this incident, correct? Yes. Struggling financially? Yes. Facing eviction? What does that have to do with... Answer the question, Commander. Were you facing eviction? I was behind on rent. Yes. Riley smiled. So you were unemployed, financially desperate, and struggling with documented mental health issues when you encountered my client. Isn't it possible you saw an opportunity? A chance to become a hero? To gain public sympathy and financial support? The courtroom erupted, animal rights activists shouting, Blake supporters cheering, the judge's gavel slamming for order. Andrea was on her feet. Objection. Counsel is testifying, not questioning. Sustained. Mr. Riley, ask questions. Don't make speeches. But the damage was done. Riley had planted the seed. Maybe Marcus wasn't a hero. Maybe he was an opportunist with PTSD who'd manufactured a crisis for attention. After Marcus's testimony, after he returned to his seat feeling stripped and exposed, Andrea leaned close. He's desperate, attacking you because he has no defense for Blake's actual crimes. The jury sees through it. But did they? Marcus looked at the 12 faces in the jury box. Some sympathetic, some uncertain, all wondering if the broke veteran with PTSD might have gotten this wrong. The trial continued for 3 days. Expert witnesses testified about animal suffering, about the psychological impact of systematic abuse, about the commercial infrastructure of viral content creation. Blake never took the stand. Riley was smart enough not to expose his client to cross-examination. Instead, Blake sat quietly, projecting remorse, letting his lawyer argue that this was all a tragic misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by an unstable veteran and overzealous prosecutors. On day 4, something unexpected happened. A woman stood up in the gallery. Elderly, maybe 70, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much grief. "Your Honor, I need to say something about that boy." She pointed at Blake. The judge looked irritated. "Ma'am, this is a federal trial. You can't just—" "My grandson died because of him." The courtroom went silent. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down, or you'll be held in contempt. My grandson was David Chen. Officer David Chen. Phoenix PD K-9 Unit. Zeus was his partner." The woman's voice shook but held firm. "When David died of cancer 5 years ago, his wife couldn't afford to keep Zeus. She surrendered him to a shelter. I tried to take him, but I was too old, too sick. I thought he'd be adopted, thought he'd have a good home for his last years." She looked at Blake with an expression that mixed heartbreak and fury. "Instead, he ended up with you. You bought him for $50 to drag behind your car for internet money. My grandson gave his life protecting this city, and his partner, his best friend, died screaming on a desert road for your followers' entertainment." Security moved to escort her out, but the judge raised a hand. "Wait." He looked at the prosecution. "Is this woman telling the truth? Was the victim in this case Officer Chen's K-9 partner?" Sarah Chen stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have the documentation. Zeus, badge number K9-247, served with Phoenix PD from 2011 to 2019. His handler was Officer David Chen, who passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2019. The family surrendered Zeus to Maricopa County Animal Services in 2020. Blake Ashton purchased him from that shelter in March 2025. The judge looked at Blake. For the first time, real emotion crossed his face. Disgust. "A police dog. You tortured a police dog. An animal that spent 8 years protecting the public. An animal whose handler died in service." Riley tried to recover. "Your Honor, the emotional circumstances don't change the legal facts. The legal facts are that your client systematically tortured animals for profit, and one of those animals was a decorated police canine whose service to this community should have earned him a peaceful retirement." The judge's voice was ice. "I'm allowing Mrs. Chen's statement into the record. The jury deserves to know exactly who Zeus was before he became your client's victim." Mrs. Chen, David's mother, Zeus's grandmother in every way that mattered, looked at Marcus before security finally escorted her out. Her eyes held gratitude. He'd given Zeus dignity in death, had made sure the old police dog wasn't just a nameless victim, but a hero remembered. That night, the jury deliberated. Andrea called Marcus with updates every hour. "They've been in there for 6 hours. That's not good. If it was open and shut, they'd have decided already." "What does it mean?" "It means some jurors believe Riley's argument, that you're unreliable, that Blake's just a kid who made mistakes." Andrea's frustration was evident. "We gave them everything. Video evidence, expert testimony, other victims, and they're still debating." Marcus sat in his empty apartment with Ranger, both of them exhausted from days of testimony and stress. His landlord had been patient, but the eviction was final. Marcus had 5 days to vacate. His bank account still showed $63,000, but he couldn't access it pending fraud investigation. He'd spent the last of his cash on food for Ranger. He was broke, soon to be homeless, and waiting for 12 strangers to decide if he'd been right to stop on that desert road. At midnight, his phone rang. Andrea. "They have a verdict. Judge wants everyone back in court at 9 a.m. "That's good, right? They decided?" "I don't know. Quick verdicts usually mean strong consensus. But 6 hours of deliberation followed by a late-night verdict?
Could go either way.
Marcus didn't sleep, just sat with Ranger, thinking about Zeus, about the old police dog who'd trusted him, about whether justice would finally come, or whether wealth and power would win again. At 8:30 a.m., Marcus entered the courthouse. Media swarmed. Questions shouted from every direction. "Commander Webb, do you think Blake will be convicted? How much money have you made from this case? Do you regret intervening?" Marcus ignored them all. Walked through with Ranger, head down, focused. Inside, the courtroom was more packed than any day of testimony. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row. Patricia Morrison with her three-legged terrier. 4 other victims Blake had abused. Sheriff Martinez, Dr. Chen. People who'd been harmed by Blake's empire of cruelty, all waiting to see if the system would protect them or fail them. Blake entered, looking pale, scared. For the first time, his practiced confidence had evaporated. He was just a 26-year-old kid, facing 20 years in federal prison. The judge entered. Everyone stood. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the count of animal crushing under Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. 48, how do you find?" "Guilty." Blake's face went white. "On the count of interstate commerce in animal abuse material?" "Guilty." "On the count of wire fraud?" "Guilty." Guilty, guilty, guilty. 7 counts, all guilty. Blake's shoulders collapsed. His mother, sitting behind him despite her husband's political abandonment, started crying. Blake's lawyer sat silent, knowing there was nothing left to argue. The judge looked at Blake with an expression that mixed professional distance and personal contempt. "Mr. Ashton, you have been found guilty of systematically torturing animals for commercial gain. You purchased living beings specifically to cause them suffering. You monetized their pain. You laughed while they died. And you showed no remorse until facing consequences." "Your Honor, Blake's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I was young. I made mistakes." "You're 26 years old. Old enough to know that causing suffering for profit is evil. Old enough to understand that animals feel pain. Old enough to take responsibility for choices that destroyed lives." The judge paused. "Sentencing is set for 30 days. Until then, you're remanded to federal custody. Bail is denied." Marshals moved to handcuff Blake. He looked at Marcus one final time. No anger now. No entitled outrage. Just defeat. The recognition that he'd finally faced someone he couldn't intimidate, couldn't buy, couldn't make disappear. Outside the courthouse, Marcus stood in the Arizona sun with Ranger and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness. Zeus was still dead. The pain still real. But satisfaction. The system had worked. Justice had been served. Blake would face consequences. Sheriff Martinez approached. "Commander, on behalf of Phoenix PD and every officer who ever worked with a canine partner, thank you. Zeus was one of ours. You made sure he mattered." Mrs. Chen found Marcus before he could leave. She was crying, but smiling.
David would be so grateful that you stopped for Zeus, that you made them pay, that you...
She couldn't finish, just pulled Marcus into a hug that held years of grief and relief. Patricia Morrison approached with Muffin. "I testified because you showed me courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear. Blake's going to prison because you refused to drive past." One by one, the other victims approached, thanked him, told stories about pets they'd lost to Blake's cruelty, shared their relief that it was finally over. Andrea found Marcus as the crowd dispersed. The U.S. attorney wants to talk to you about your GoFundMe money. The fraud investigation. What about it? It's cleared. All $63,000 is legally yours. Donations from people who believed in what you did. You can access it immediately. $63,000. Enough to find a new apartment, buy a reliable truck, live on while searching for employment. Not wealth, but breathing room. There's something else, Andrea continued. We're filing civil suits against Blake on behalf of all the victims. Asset recovery for veterinary costs, emotional damages, punitive compensation. The total is approaching $400,000. Blake's going to lose everything. His accounts, his equipment, his family money. Good. Let him feel what it's like to have nothing. Marcus, Andrea's voice softened. You know you're a hero, right? You saved more than just Zeus. You saved every animal that won't be abused by Blake. Every viewer who won't be taught that cruelty is entertainment. You changed the conversation about influencer accountability. Marcus looked at Ranger. The German shepherd sat patiently, amber eyes watching his partner, waiting for the next command. I'm not a hero. I just couldn't drive past. That's what makes you a hero. Everyone else could drive past, did drive past. You couldn't. That's the difference. As Marcus walked to his truck, soon to be replaced with something that didn't overheat every 20 miles, his phone rang. Unknown number. Commander Webb? This is Colonel Patricia Sanders, U.S. Navy Special Warfare Command. I've been following your case. I wanted to discuss a potential opportunity. We're developing a program for retired military working dogs. Rehabilitation, adoption advocacy, public education. We need someone who understands both military culture and animal welfare. Someone with your experience and demonstrated commitment. Would you be interested in discussing a civilian contractor position? Marcus stopped walking. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a purpose. Salary, benefits, the chance to make sure what happened to Zeus doesn't happen to other retired MWDs. Interested? Yes, absolutely yes. After the call ended, Marcus sat in his truck with Ranger and felt tears he'd held back for weeks finally surface. Not grief, not relief. Something else. The understanding that Zeus's death had meant something beyond headlines, had created real change, had given Marcus a path forward. He drove to Dr. Chen's clinic, found the memorial garden, knelt beside Zeus's marker. You did it, boy. You beat them. Not by surviving, by mattering, by being remembered, by showing the world that every life has value, even an old police dog that everyone else forgot. Ranger lay down beside the marker, respectful, honoring a fallen warrior. Marcus placed his hand on the stone. I've got a job now, working with retired military dogs, making sure they're protected when they can't protect themselves anymore. You gave me that. Your suffering, your death. It taught me that my purpose isn't fighting wars. It's protecting the ones who can't fight back. The sun moved across the sky. Marcus sat in that garden for a long time, making promises to a dog who couldn't hear them, but would have understood. Promises to never drive past suffering again. To use his second chance, his unexpected platform and resources, to help animals like Zeus, who'd given everything and asked nothing. And as Marcus finally stood, as he and Ranger walked back to the truck to begin packing for a new apartment and a new job and a new purpose, he understood that Zeus had saved his life just as much as he'd saved Zeus's, had reminded him that broken didn't mean useless. That surviving meant you had a responsibility to help others survive. That sometimes the smallest act of courage created the biggest change. Zeus was gone, but his legacy lived on in every animal that would be protected, because Marcus refused to be silent. Every abuser who'd think twice because Blake was in prison. Every person who'd find courage to intervene because they'd seen that one person could make a difference. That was Zeus's gift. Not survival. Purpose. And Marcus Webb would spend the rest of his life honoring that gift. Blake Ashton's sentencing hearing was scheduled for 30 days after the verdict. Marcus didn't plan to attend. He'd done his part, testified, watched justice prevail, moved on. But the night before sentencing, Mrs. Chen called. "Commander Webb, I need to ask you something. Tomorrow, when the judge sentences that boy, I want to make a victim impact statement. About David. About Zeus. About what their partnership meant to our family. But I'm old. My voice shakes. I'm afraid I won't be able to finish." "You'll do fine, Mrs. Chen." "Will you be there? In the courtroom? I need to know someone who understands is listening. Someone who loved Zeus, too." Marcus closed his eyes. He hadn't loved Zeus. Not in the traditional sense. He'd known the old police dog for less than 2 weeks. But he'd cared, had made promises, had refused to let Zeus die alone and forgotten. "I'll be there." The courtroom was packed again. Media, victims, animal rights advocates, and Blake's mother, sitting alone in the back row, abandoned by her husband who'd chosen political survival over family loyalty. Blake entered in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, looking 20 pounds lighter than his arrest. 30 days in federal detention had stripped away the influencer polish. He looked young, scared, broken. The judge, Federal Judge Margaret Harrison, 63, with a reputation for tough sentencing in animal cruelty cases, reviewed the pre-sentence report. Her expression was unreadable. "Before I impose sentence, I'll hear victim impact statements. Who wishes to speak?" Mrs. Chen stood, walked to the podium with slow, dignified steps. Her hands trembled as she gripped the sides. "My name is Elaine Chen. My son David was a Phoenix police officer for 12 years before cancer took him at 34. Zeus was his canine partner for 8 of those years. They were more than cop and dog. They were brothers." Her voice wavered, but held. "When David died, Zeus grieved, stopped eating, wouldn't leave David's grave after the funeral. We tried to keep him, but we couldn't afford the medical care he needed. So we surrendered him to a shelter, trusted them to find him a good home for his last years." Mrs. Chen looked at Blake. "Instead, my son's partner, the animal who protected him, who saved his life twice, who stayed by his hospital bed during chemotherapy, ended up dragged behind your car for TikTok donations. You tortured him for money, for views, for entertainment, and you laughed while he died." Blake's head dropped. Tears ran down his face. Real ones, finally. "David gave his life protecting people like you. People who take safety for granted. People who don't understand sacrifice. And you repaid that sacrifice by destroying his best friend." Mrs. Chen's voice strengthened. "But you didn't win, because a stranger stopped. A man with no connection to David or Zeus saw suffering and refused to ignore it. That man gave Zeus dignity in death, made sure he mattered, made sure you faced consequences." She turned to Marcus. "Commander Webb, thank you. You honored my son's memory by protecting his partner. You showed the world that even old, discarded police dogs deserve respect. You saved more than Zeus. You saved our faith that good people still exist." After Mrs. Chen sat, Patricia Morrison spoke about Muffin, about finding her 3-legged terrier in a shelter 3 counties away, nearly dead from untreated infections Blake had caused. 4 other victims followed. Each story the same: animals purchased or stolen, abused for content, discarded when they stopped generating views, each voice adding weight to the mountain of evidence showing Blake wasn't just cruel, he was systematic. When the victim statements ended, Judge Harrison looked at Blake. "Mr. Ashton, do you wish to speak before I impose sentence?" Blake's attorney, James Riley, whispered something. Blake shook his head, stood. "Your Honor, His voice cracked. "I know apologizing doesn't fix what I did. I know words don't heal the animals I hurt or the people I traumatized. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. I was selfish. I cared more about views and money than living beings. I dehumanized animals, treated them like props instead of creatures that feel pain and fear." He looked at Mrs. Chen. "I can't bring Zeus back. Can't undo what I did to him. But I want you to know, those last hours of his life haunt me. I see his eyes in my sleep, hear him struggling to breathe. And I finally understand what I took from him, what I took from your family. I destroyed something sacred for temporary internet fame." Blake turned to Marcus. "You could have kept driving, could have decided Zeus wasn't your problem, but you stopped, risked everything to save a dog you didn't know. That makes you everything I'm not. And I hope, wherever Zeus is now, he knows someone finally stood up for him." Judge Harrison let the silence settle. Then she spoke. "Mr. Ashton, I've presided over criminal cases for 22 years. I've seen every kind of defendant. The ones who show remorse to reduce their sentence. The ones who genuinely understand the harm they've caused. And the ones who apologize because their lawyer told them to." She paused. "I believe your remorse is real. I also believe it came far too late." Blake's mother sobbed quietly in the back row. "You systematically tortured animals for profit. You created a business model based on suffering. You recruited accomplices. You evaded accountability through family wealth and political connections. And you only stopped when someone with nothing, no money, no power, no platform, refused to let you continue." Judge Harrison opened the sentencing guidelines. "The prosecution recommends 15 years. The defense requests 5, with credit for time served and good behavior. I've reviewed the evidence, the victim statements, your criminal history, which includes 3 prior incidents of animal abuse that were dismissed due to your father's intervention." Blake's head snapped up. "What? You think I wouldn't investigate? Your juvenile records were sealed but not destroyed. At 14, you set fire to a neighbor's rabbit hutch, killing 3 rabbits. At 16, you poisoned a classmate's cat after she rejected you. At 19, you ran over a dog intentionally, then posted about it online before your father's lawyers made it disappear." Judge Harrison's voice was steel. "This isn't a young man who made mistakes. This is a pattern of escalating cruelty spanning 12 years. Marcus felt cold satisfaction. Blake's entire defense had been built on being a misguided kid. But he'd been torturing animals since childhood. "Therefore, I sentence you as follows. On each count of animal crushing, 7 counts, you'll serve 5 years consecutive. That's 35 years. On wire fraud and interstate commerce charges, an additional 5 years concurrent. Total sentence, 35 years in federal prison. No parole. Credit for time served." The courtroom erupted. Blake's mother screamed. Animal advocates cheered. Blake collapsed into his chair, face white, hands shaking. "Additionally, you're ordered to pay $427,000 in restitution to your victims. All assets are hereby seized and liquidated. And you're permanently banned from owning, fostering, or being in contact with any animal upon release. Violation will result in immediate return to custody." Blake looked at his mother, at Marcus, at the judge, searching for mercy that didn't exist. "Mr. Ashton, you built an empire on suffering, profited from pain, laughed while innocence died. Now you'll spend the next 3 decades understanding what it means to be powerless, to be at someone else's mercy, to know that your comfort and wishes don't matter. Judge Harrison's gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Marshals led Blake away. He looked smaller than Marcus remembered. Not dangerous anymore. Just defeated. Outside, media swarmed Marcus. Questions shouted from every direction, but Sheriff Martinez and her deputies created a barrier, giving Marcus space to breathe. Andrea appeared at his side. 35 years. That's a life sentence for someone his age. He'll be 61 when he gets out. He destroyed lives for 12 years. He's paying for what he's done. More than that, the FBI's investigation into the Discord server. 43 influencers involved in animal abuse content. They're all facing federal charges now. Blake's conviction set the precedent. No more claiming performance art. No more buying your way out. You changed the law, Marcus. I didn't change anything. I just stopped for a dog. You did more than that, and you know it. Andrea pulled out her phone, showed him a news headline. Congress introduces Zeus's Law, federal legislation to close loopholes in animal abuse prosecution. Marcus read the article. Legislators from both parties had introduced a bill specifically targeting influencers who abuse animals for content. It mandated federal prosecution, asset seizure, and permanent bans from social media platforms for anyone convicted. They named it after him, after Zeus. Because of what happened to him. Because you made people pay attention. Because a decorated Navy SEAL risked everything for an old police dog. And the world finally understood that animals matter. Mrs. Chen found Marcus before he could leave. Commander, David's grave is here in Tucson. I visit every week. Would you come with me today? I want to tell him about Zeus, about justice finally coming. I think he'd want you there. Marcus followed her to the cemetery. David Chen's grave was simple. Officer, husband, father, hero. Beside it, Mrs. Chen had placed a small marker for Zeus, not a grave since his ashes were at Dr. Chen's clinic, but a memorial. David used to say Zeus understood him better than most people, that the dog knew when he was sad, scared, overwhelmed, knew when to push closer or give space. Mrs. Chen knelt, placed flowers on both markers. After David died, Zeus was the only thing that still made sense, the only piece of my son I had left. Losing him, to cancer, then to you surrendering him, then to that monster, it felt like losing David all over again. I'm sorry I couldn't save him, that he suffered before. But you gave him peace at the end. You made sure his last days weren't alone in a shelter or on a desert road. You gave him warmth, safety, love. That's all anyone can ask for. She looked at Marcus with eyes that held both grief and gratitude. You gave Zeus what David would have wanted, a warrior's death, surrounded by people who honored his service. Marcus knelt beside the marker, read Zeus's inscription. K9-247, faithful partner, protector, friend. I made him a promise, Marcus said quietly, that his death would mean something, that Blake would face justice, that other animals would be protected because Zeus couldn't be. He touched the marker. I kept that promise. When Marcus returned to his apartment, soon to be vacated, 5 days left on his eviction notice, he found a message from Colonel Sanders at Navy Special Warfare Command. Commander Webb, we've finalized your contract. Starting salary is $74,000 annually with full benefits. Your job is to advocate for retired military working dogs, coordinate adoptions, and develop rehabilitation programs. You'll work directly with the K9 Program Office. We're also establishing the Zeus Memorial Fund, donations to support medical care for retired MWDs. Your story inspired Congress to allocate funding. Report to Naval Special Warfare Group 1 in 2 weeks. Welcome to the team. 74,000. Benefits, purpose. A job doing exactly what Zeus's death had taught him mattered. Protecting those who'd protected others. Marcus called Jennifer. I got the job. Real job. Navy civilian contractor. Jennifer's relief was audible. Oh, thank God, Marcus, I've been so worried. Watching you struggle, watching them attack you, I thought this would destroy you. It almost did. But Zeus, his death gave me something to fight for, something that mattered more than my own pain. You saved more than just one dog. You know that, right? You changed laws, changed how people think about animal abuse, changed... Her voice caught. You changed yourself, found purpose again. After hanging up, Marcus started packing. His possessions fit in 6 boxes. Military efficiency, keeping only what mattered. As he packed, Ranger supervised, tail wagging occasionally when Marcus unearthed a toy or treat the dog recognized. We're moving up, boy. Real apartment. Maybe even a yard where you can run. Ranger's response was to lean against Marcus's leg. Solid. Constant. The loyalty that had never wavered even when Marcus had nothing to offer but struggle. The next day, Dr. Chen called. Marcus, I have something for you. Can you come to the clinic? He arrived to find her standing beside Zeus's memorial marker in the garden. Beside it was a new addition, a bronze plaque mounted on stone. Read it, she said. Marcus read, Zeus, K9-247. In his life, he protected the innocent. In his death, he inspired a nation. His legacy lives in every animal saved, because one man refused to look away. Dedicated by those who loved him, and the stranger who became his hero. The veterinary community raised money for this. Vets across Arizona who treat retired working dogs. They wanted Zeus remembered. They wanted you honored. Marcus couldn't speak, just stood there reading and rereading the words until they blurred. Dr. Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. You know what the most powerful thing about this story is? You didn't save Zeus's life. He died anyway. But you saved his dignity, his legacy. You made sure he mattered. And sometimes, that's the greatest rescue of all. On moving day, Marcus packed his truck, soon to be replaced with something reliable courtesy of his new salary, and took one last walk through the apartment that had been home for 3 years. The broken window was still broken, the walls still water-stained, but this place had witnessed his transformation from broken veteran to someone with purpose. He drove to the memorial garden one final time. Ranger followed as Marcus knelt beside Zeus's marker and the new bronze plaque. I'm leaving Arizona, Zeus. Got a job in California, protecting dogs like you, making sure retired MWDs don't end up discarded, making sure what happened to you doesn't happen to others. Marcus's voice was steady. I know you can't hear me, but I need to say this anyway. Thank you for teaching me that my life still had meaning, that surviving wasn't enough. I had to fight for something bigger than myself. You gave me that. Ranger lay down beside the marker, silent tribute. I'm going to live the rest of my life making sure your death mattered. Every dog I help, every law I advocate for, every time I choose courage over comfort. That's your legacy. That's how you win. Not by surviving, by mattering. Marcus stood, placed his hand on the bronze plaque one last time, then turned toward his truck and the future waiting beyond Arizona's borders. As he drove away from Tucson, as the desert gave way to mountains, and eventually to California coastline, as Ranger dozed in the passenger seat and the sun tracked across the sky, Marcus thought about the math of heroism. He'd stopped for one dog, one elderly German shepherd that everyone else had dismissed as not worth saving. And that single act had cascaded into federal legislation, 43 arrests, hundreds of thousands of dollars raised for animal welfare, and a national conversation about accountability and cruelty. One choice, one moment of refusing to drive past suffering. That was all it took to change everything. Marcus reported to Naval Special Warfare Group 1 on a Monday morning. His new office was small but real. Desk, computer, phone, resources to actually help instead of just witness. His first assignment was coordinating the adoption of 12 retired MWDs who'd served in Afghanistan. Dogs like Ranger. Warriors who'd given everything and needed families who understood. Within 3 months, Marcus had placed all 12. Within 6 months, he developed a rehabilitation program for dogs with PTSD. Within a year, Zeus's law passed both houses of Congress and was signed by the president. The law mandated federal prosecution for animal abuse content, required social media platforms to actively remove such content, and established the Zeus Memorial Fund with $10 million in annual funding for retired MWD care. On the 1-year anniversary of Zeus's death, Marcus returned to Tucson for a memorial ceremony. Mrs. Chen was there, Patricia Morrison, Dr. Chen, Sheriff Martinez, Andrea Liu, all the people who'd fought beside him when the world said one old dog didn't matter. And standing at the back, wearing a visitor's badge and surrounded by federal marshals, was Blake Ashton. Marcus froze when he saw him. Blake approached slowly, hands in cuffs, eyes downcast. "Commander Webb, I asked permission to attend, to pay my respects. They said yes if I stayed under guard." "Why?" "Because I need to face what I did, not hide from it in a cell. I need to stand here and acknowledge that Zeus mattered, that I destroyed something valuable, that—" Blake's voice broke. "That I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have." Marcus looked at Blake, at the man who'd tortured Zeus for money, who'd spent a year in federal prison, who had 34 more years ahead of him. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just exhaustion. "Zeus forgave you before he died. When I held him at the end, when he looked at me, there was no anger, just release. He let go of the pain you caused and found peace." Marcus paused. "I don't forgive you. That's not my right. But I don't hate you either. You're just someone who learned too late that actions have consequences." Blake nodded. "I hope, wherever he is, he knows I finally understand." After Blake was escorted away, after the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Marcus stood alone in the memorial garden with Ranger. The bronze plaque gleamed in the afternoon sun, Zeus's name catching light. Marcus's phone rang. Colonel Sanders. "Webb, we've got an emergency. Retired MWD in Oregon. Handler died suddenly. Dog's being surrendered to a kill shelter because family can't afford medical care. They're euthanizing him tomorrow, unless someone intervenes." Marcus felt the familiar pull, the same instinct that had made him stop on that desert road a year ago. "I'm on it. Send me the details." "You sure? It's 1,000 miles. You just got back from Arizona." "I'm sure. Someone has to stand up for them. Someone has to refuse to look away." "That's why we hired you, Commander, because you never could drive past." Marcus hung up, looked at Ranger. "Ready for another mission, boy?" Ranger's tail wagged, always ready. As they walked to the truck, as Marcus began planning the drive to Oregon to save another dog the world had forgotten, he understood that Zeus's death had been the beginning, not the end. Beginning of purpose. Beginning of understanding that heroism wasn't about grand gestures or glory. It was about showing up, again and again, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Zeus had given Marcus that. had taught him that surviving meant using your second chance to protect others from suffering the way you suffered. And Marcus Webb, former Navy SEAL, reformed broken veteran, accidental hero, would spend the rest of his life honoring that lesson. One dog at a time, one intervention at a time, one refusal to drive past suffering at a time. Because that's what heroes did. Not because they were fearless, because they couldn't live with themselves if they did nothing. Zeus had shown him that, and Marcus would never forget. Never stop fighting, never stop protecting, never stop proving that one person refusing to look away could save the world. One life at a time.